All right, so welcome. This is Steph from Door County Medical Center, and she's going to talk about body mechanics. So I will let Steph take it over.
Hi, Melissa. Hi. So with body mechanics, my main focus today is just really trying to avoid injury when helping a loved one and really doing all of those things that you're doing throughout the day in terms of the caregiving. You know, if you're helping with bathing, dressing, getting in and out of bed, a chair, or a car. Although we're going to be discussing the physical requirements needed for caregiving, the emotional and mental side of caregiving can often be more challenging, or often the most challenging aspect of caregiving. But if you have good processes in place to help with the physical side of things, it can at least maybe ease the mental or emotional side of things. Okay. But first of all, thank you for all that you do. You give so much of yourself to help others. Okay. And Melissa, please let me know if you have any questions during our discussion today, because if you have a question about something, just let me know. Okay. So, I'm an OT, occupational therapist. I've been a therapist for 20 years. I've worked all around the Midwest, but I've been here in Door County for 8 years. The thing about body mechanics is if a caregiver is injured, it frequently results in their loved one losing the ability to remain in the community setting. Okay, so it's so important for us to be able to keep you and the rest of the caregivers as safe as possible. Okay. Body mechanics is a term used to describe the ways we move as we go about our daily lives. So it's not just that lifting and everything like that, but it's also looking at posture and keeping our spine and our limbs just in the proper position so that way we can avoid injury. You know, what we're going to be talking about today are just little golden nuggets of knowledge from many perspectives that I've had, including residential and professional caregiving, as well as physical therapy and occupational therapy. So, body mechanics is a term used to describe the ways we move as we go about our daily lives. And again, first of all, thank you. Welcome. Just wanted to thank you for all that you do with your caregiving. Okay. So there's different positions that our body is in when we perform different activities. Activities that we perform just for ourselves, such as dressing, bathing, brushing our teeth, all that stuff, and cooking. We certainly want to think about our body mechanics when we're assisting a loved one, but we also want to be thinking about it when we're doing all the other tasks like cooking, homemaking, making beds, cleaning, grocery shopping, all of those things that we do every day, in addition to the actual assisting that we do for our loved ones. When you think about it, excuse me, all of those other things that you do throughout the day can certainly have an impact on your ability to caregive. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, I was, lifting, I've been doing a lot of lifting, but it was just that one little thing that I did. I was just kind of bending over the sink, brushing my teeth, and boom, I just, my back just kind of went out and it really got aggravated. So let me know if you have any questions, okay? Because if you having a question, I'm sure other people are having the same question. So you can just go ahead and unmute yourself by pressing the space bar and go ahead and let me know if you have any questions. So a lot of times, people will think that their back goes out due to that one injury. But a lot of times our back is having these little traumas over time. And so, we may have a backache And those little traumas are caused by just little strains on the muscles, the ligaments, and I spelt muscles wrong. I just see that muscles, but it's actually muscles. But the strains on the spinal disc, and so those little backaches could be seen as little traumas. Okay, and over time they could add up to produce a full-blown back injury. So we're doing everything we can to avoid those little traumas, and then in turn avoiding that full-blown back injury. So just a quick little anatomy. So we've got the vertebrae, the bones in our back, and then we've got the discs in between the bones. And then we've also got our spinal nerve root and the spinal cord going along right behind and right in the middle of the vertebrae. And so what happens is those little traumas can put strain on those ligaments, on those muscles, and on those discs. So we just want to avoid that, okay? The other piece, and I'm going to advance my next slide, is we're looking at the curves of our back. And that's really important. So with looking at the curves of our back, we've got that little, that cervical curve really has got kind of a one curve kind of going in, and then we hit that thoracic part of our spine, and that really kind of curves out. And then we hit that lumbar part, and that's really that low back part that a lot of times people struggle with. And that really, when you look at that lumbar curve, it's really kind of a just a very gradual, it's a really gentle curve there, okay? So with keeping that anatomy in thought, as we advance to the next slide, we want to look at good posture, and that good posture is essential for having a healthy spine. So your mom was right to keeping that good posture, okay? Excuse me. So we want to maintain those normal curves that we just mentioned when we're doing those different activities to really kind of help minimize or eliminate any of those abnormal stresses in our back. So as we're doing things like brushing our teeth or maybe lifting something off of the floor, we really want to keep in mind of trying to, think about those, those good curves, okay? So principles of safe lifting, okay? So because once we get out of that normal alignment, that's when we really kind of get into trouble and kind of maybe cause those little traumas in our back. So when we're thinking of safe lifting or safe posture when we're doing anything, it might be changing sheets on the bed, tucking the sheets under the bed, grabbing, could be grabbing a skillet out of the cupboard, all those things that we do every day. And then in turn, it can also be helping a loved one with standing from a chair, helping a loved one roll to the side of the bed, okay? So we'll keep those things in mind when we talk about the principles of safe lifting. So first things first, maintaining a really good base of support, okay? When we're looking at lifting or moving something, we really want to spread our feet at greater than shoulder width apart. So if you think about that, you can also put your feet kind of more in a scissor position. So maybe they're not really aligned side by side, but kind of spread your feet apart. That way they're not right together. We want to spread out that base of support, kind of put our scissor feet. Okay, so one forward, one backward. And then that physical space available will typically dictate which position to use when assisting with moving or transfer. So for example, a lot of times if we're helping a loved one transfer from the bed to a chair or something like that, we may want to have our feet kind of more one forward, one backward. So kind of more of that scissor, or side by side. So you're kind of going to have to figure out what's going to work out best. And the other because it kind of leads into our next principle of safe lifting, keeping that load close. Okay, we really get into trouble if we're kind of reaching out in front of us, because that torque on our spine can really be affected. If you've got 10 pounds here, it's 10 pounds here. When you've got 10 pounds out here, it's about 100 pounds of torque on our back. So you really want to keep that load close, okay? Number 3, bending with your knees and not with your back. So really when you're leaning down and lifting something up off the floor, really try to bend your knees as best as possible, okay? So bending down and then kind of keeping that that curve of your spine the way it was. Like I said, that lumbar curve is really kind of a gentle curve. So if we're really bending over on that lumbar spine, boy, that really kind of pulls and has those little traumas that we were talking about onto that spine. So you want to maintain that curve that it had. And the way that we can do that is by bending our knees. Push instead of pull whenever possible. Okay, so if you're thinking, well, for example, I see people in the grocery store sometimes, we definitely want to push the grocery cart, but sometimes I'll see people, they're pulling the grocery cart. For example, that really puts that twist on your spine. We don't want to do that. Again, that's that little trauma. And then we're also pulling with our arm, and boy, that's so bad for your shoulder to pull backwards, okay? And then the other thing I can think of is the next one. Size doesn't matter. So even if you're, a bigger person and you're strong and everything, if you've got those bad body mechanics, there's a good chance that you can cause yourself an injury. I think to when I've worked in the hospital, and we've had patients who might be really, really tiny, maybe about 95 pounds. But if we're assisting that patient and we're not using good body mechanics, we're at a good chance of injuring ourselves, even though that person is really pretty small. And then you go on the other spectrum. If we're assisting a patient and they may be heavier, but if we've got really good body mechanics, we can really help protect ourselves by using those good body mechanics. Think before you move. This is a big one. When you're in your house and you're assisting, one of your loved ones, I think setting yourself up for success is a big one. So having whatever supplies you need close by. If you're helping a loved one, maybe with their toileting or something like that, you're in the bathroom, you certainly want to make sure that you have all the supplies you need, whether it be wipes, additional clothing, those sorts of things. That way you're not having to go back and forth, maybe to and from the bedroom. And then if, you're having to basically make extra work for yourself. But also if your loved one may not be able to be alone. So if you are having to leave them to go get new supplies or things like that, it's putting them at more risk of a fall if you're having to leave them back and forth. So the other thing is having I keep going back to the bathroom situation. So making sure, and we can talk more about this in terms of bathroom setup. Oh gosh, the light just went off in here, but that's okay. But we can talk more about maybe suggestions or recommendations about bathroom setup, because that's a big one. And that's really where I think a lot, if you're having to give physical assistance, that's where it can really be a challenge. And so we can talk more about that as we go. Think about too, we really don't want to twist. Twisting is not good for the spine. So think about ways how you can avoid being like a human pretzel. Okay, we may have items maybe over to the side that we're needing to use. That's okay. And make sure that those are closer to where you need to. That way you're avoiding that twisting, because that twisting is, again, causing those little traumas on your back. So if you're having to reach over to get something, move with your feet rather than having to twist into a human pretzel. Bending so you don't break. So oftentimes we as caregivers tend to keep our legs locked. So you want to maintain that stable footing and a slight bend in your knees, and then just bend with just the lower back. So keeping the legs locked puts a high level of pressure on our body. And I'm going to switch to the next slide. Because again, like our picture on the right side, the red one, we tend to keep those knees locked and then bend over at our back. Not good at all. So green is good. You want to maintain, and as you can see, those natural curves of the spine. It looked just like that picture from before. Maintain those natural curves. So we want to do our best to bend with our knees, keeping that load close, and that can really decrease the amount of shearing that's caused in our back. The next topic, cueing the loved one. And every situation is going to be completely different given the circumstances that you're dealing with. So, but oftentimes we're having to give instruction to our loved one, whether it be during their activities of daily living, so like showering, getting on and off the toilet, in and out of the car. So I'm going to give some examples of how best we can cue our loved ones when we're doing certain activities. So for example, the first one, standing from a chair, okay? Now, a lot of these things you may know, but I think it's good refresher, okay? So using a chair with armrests if available. I like to recommend to try not to use chairs that are on wheels, okay? So a lot of times we'll have those kitchen chairs that are on wheels. Really try to avoid that, okay? But having those chairs with the armrests and having that gives the person the ability to push up from the chair with their arms, and then they can stand, versus grabbing for a walker and then trying to stand. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. And then really, first step would be to instruct them to scoot in the chair. So they're going to kind of scooch a little bit forward towards the edge of the chair, but not too far, of course. And then instruct them to slide their feet back a little bit, okay? You could try this at home. It's really, really hard to stand from a chair if your feet are way out in front of you. It's next to near impossible. So instruct them and cue them to scoot their feet, slide their feet back, and making sure that their feet are positioned so that they can rise efficiently to a standing position, okay? And then instruct them to use both hands to push down from the armrests when standing, okay? And like I said, never place both hands on the walker to pull up from a standing position. Again, that's really hard to do as well. To pull yourself up using a walker, it's just kind of a recipe for disaster. And that's another thing you could, try at home. It's next to near impossible. Sometimes people will push from one armrest and then kind of steady themselves on the walker. Ideally, it's best to have them push from the armrest and then grab hold of the walker. So this is a really good way to kind of move through the sequencing of the physical aspect of how you would want your loved one to do it, but also ways that you can cue them to stand from a chair. Okay. Next part would be sitting up in bed. Now, this is definitely one where for some reason, us as caregivers, I don't know why, but we always want to tend to help out more than probably what we need to. So I feel like a lot of times when we're helping our loved one sit up from the bed or something like that, or rolling in the bed, we often have a tendency to assist them more than we need to, putting us at risk for injury. Excuse me. So this would be one where we certainly want them to do as much as they can on their own, but obviously we don't want to put them in a difficult situation to have them do more than what they're capable of doing. The best technique to have them getting up out of bed or bed mobility, we would want them to roll onto their side. So that would be the first step. And like I said, having them do as much as they can on their own. And then once they're on their side, instruct them to slide their legs off of the side of the bed and push up from their forearm up into a sitting position. Okay? So they're in bed, roll onto their side, push up from their forearm and into a sitting position. Now, if your loved one has an element of dementia, it is best to give as simple and brief instruction as you can, okay? So going through step by step. So you could just say, roll to your side, and really try to keep it as limited as possible with each step. Okay. The next part, this is a big one, that car transfer. So having the wheelchair or the walker positioned prior to the transfer. This is one too, set up your environment as best and as planning as best as you can. Certainly want to lock the wheelchair and move the foot plates out of the way and instruct them to not hold on to the door, because we certainly don't want to use anything as a base of support if it's going to move. And that door will move if we're using that as a base of support. Okay. But really, if they're sitting in the car and they're going to be coming out, you want to break it into a couple different steps. So the first step would have them be where they are sitting straight forward in the car. And then the next step would have them be bringing their legs over. Now they're still sitting, but where they're turning in their seat and bringing their legs over, and they're sitting and their feet are placed out on the edge of the car. Okay. A lot of times when we're helping people, there's that tendency to kind of combine it all into one step where they're trying to straddle the foot area of the car, and then they're trying to do it all in one go. That's very difficult. So just have them spin feet out of the car and then have them try to push up from the seat. Okay. And then sit on up. Now, if you are having trouble, if you've got cloth seats or something like that, you could use like a garbage bag. That way it's a lot easier to slide, okay, and to turn to the outside, okay. And this is a lot of times where caregivers tend to get injured as well. Lifting that manual wheelchair into the car or lifting a walker into the car. So again, you really want to think of your body mechanics and lifting properly into that trunk of the car or into the back of the car. So first things first, you want to make that wheelchair as light as you can. And so you want to kind of break up that wheelchair as best as you can into smaller parts. So removing the foot plates, definitely helpful because those babies are heavy. So that can limit the amount of weight. And then removing the cushion. Now, not all manual wheelchairs can you remove the cushion. But if it is a removable cushion, and depending on the type of wheelchair that your loved one has, those tend to be pretty heavy too. So if it is removable and easily removable, go ahead and remove that. Okay. Another tip.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
with the wheelchair, when I'm a caregiver with someone with a physical disability, and when we go to a conference at the Kalahari and we pack her wheelchair in the car, we do remove the foot plates and remove both cushions.
Yeah.
To make it as light as possible when lifting it into the person's vehicle.
Yeah.
So that's a really good tip.
Yeah. Do you notice quite a bit of a difference, Melissa?
Because the foot plates are really heavy, and then when you get to the cushions, depending how many there are, those are really heavy as well. You don't realize how heavy they are until you lift it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if the person's not in a wheelchair a whole lot, you could use like a transfer chair. Those are fairly light. But if the person is in the wheelchair for longer than, I would say, 20 minutes, the transfer chair is not a good option because it doesn't really give good support. It could cause a person more at a risk for, a pressure sore or something like that. So, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Melissa. So it does make a difference, that's for sure. Again, we kind of talked about this, have your loved one do as much as possible. Like I said, though, within reason and what is safe. If we're certainly helping our loved one, we love them. We want to help them as much as possible, but we certainly have to, have them do as much as they can. Obviously, though, the level of assist required may vary from day to day due to their medical condition, and their varying level of strength. So we certainly want to keep that in mind. And we certainly wouldn't want to push them, with, I guess, beyond their capabilities. So, yeah. This would be the part where I'd say, "Hey, let's practice," but it's kind of hard to practice those techniques. But I don't know. I mean, every situation is different. A lot of times, people are caregiving for somebody who doesn't require much physical assistance in their daily activities. But again, it is that everyday activities, doing the cooking, laundry, cleaning, all of that stuff can really mount up to a lot of physical assistance required. So you certainly want to keep those body mechanics in mind.
I was just gonna say, like I said, my client has a physical disability, and today she could be fine doing as much as she can, but then tomorrow, she's doing half of what she did yesterday because she's either sore from what she did or she just can't get up
Yeah.
physically because of the her disability. So it just, like you said, it depends day to day, but have them do as much as possible, but at the same time, you know, try to help them as well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Melissa, too. We'll find it too where the person can certainly overdo it. And so like yesterday, oh, they were able to do more. And now today they are so from yesterday. So it's really a fine line. It's tough. And so then the level of assistance that you're needing to provide varies. And yeah, it's a certainly tough situation. Absolutely. So, in terms of body mechanics, then, we may be assisting, a lot of times we're kind of in that they call it the sandwich generation. We may be caring for our older loved ones, but then we're also caring for our younger loved ones. We may have children or grandchildren that we're also caring for. And so you certainly want to keep those body mechanics in mind when you're working and loving those children or grandchildren, because then it's going to affect your ability to care and caregive for your older or spouses or your people that you are hired to caregive for. So definitely keeping how we move our bodies every day throughout the day, because it certainly makes a difference. Yeah. Do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions at the moment, so.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, that's really it, in a nutshell. It's kind of hard to do the body mechanics when we're on video. So, especially in kind of a small screen. I can try laying down on the table and rolling, but I don't know how well that would work out. So, yeah. Whoops.
Well, that was me. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Hey, Jen, I have a question about the last two caregiver sessions, the 17th and 19th. I don't believe I signed up for those. Is it possible you can send me a link to those two? The
Sure.
last ones? Okay, that would be perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, thank you very much, Steph, for coming and joining us today. And if anybody has any questions later, feel free to shoot us a message, and I'll get that to Steph too to help answer any of your questions.
Definitely. Thank you, Jenny, for giving me this opportunity. So, and thank you both for listening in. I appreciate it. So.
All right. Well, thank